There's a clip you have probably seen where Truly Brown is laughing. Full, uninhibited, little kid laughing. TLC used it everywhere. In promos, in recaps, in the kind of feel-good montages that networks put together when they want you to believe everything is fine. A happy family. A different kind of love story. Look at this little girl, carefree and giggling, proof that this whole experiment works. That clip was used to promote one of the most watched seasons of Sister Wives. And here's what TLC never told you. That season was airing at the exact same time Christine Brown was telling producers behind closed doors that she was done, that she could not do it anymore, that her marriage was over. You were watching a little girl's family collapse, and TLC turned it into entertainment. If that hit you somewhere uncomfortable, good. It should. And if you are new here, welcome to SisterWives Crew. Hit that like button right now and subscribe, because what we do on this channel is go past the edited version, past the producer-approved storyline, and into what was actually happening. You are going to want to be here for this one. Let's go back to the beginning. Not Truly's beginning, but the beginning of the brand. Because Sister Wives was never just a show. It was a carefully constructed argument. The argument was simple. Polygamy works, love is abundant, and this family is proof. TLC needed viewers to believe that. And to believe it, they needed visuals, they needed symbols, and nothing sells a lifestyle quite like a happy child. Truly Brown was born in 2010, the youngest child of Christine and Cody Brown. From almost the moment she was old enough to appear on camera without crying, she became the emotional centerpiece of the show's softer moments. She was cute. She was funny. She had a personality in a way that translated beautifully to television. Producers knew it, audiences responded to it, and so Truly became something she never signed up to be. The living mascot of a lifestyle brand. Think about what that means in practice. Every time viewers at home started questioning whether the plural marriage system was actually damaging to the people inside it, the show would cut to Truly laughing with her sisters, climbing on Cody's back, doing something that a child in a broken, loveless household simply would not do. She was the counterargument. Her happiness, or the performance of her happiness, was the product, and the audience bought it. For years they bought it. Here is the detail that does not get talked about enough, and it matters more than almost anything else in this story. Truly was the youngest of Christine's children. That is a fact most fans know. But the implication of that fact is something most people have never fully sat with. Her older siblings, Aspen, Mykelti, Peyton, Gwendolyn, Isabel, all had years of Cody Brown, when Cody Brown was, by most accounts, still trying, still present, still showing up in some meaningful way. They have memories of a father who, whatever his flaws, was at least physically and emotionally in the room more often than not. Truly does not have those memories. She was a toddler when the cracks started forming. She was in early elementary school when the distance between Cody and Christine became something the cameras could no longer completely hide. She grew up inside the deterioration. It was not something that happened to her family. It was the only version of her family she ever really knew. Her older siblings got years of Cody. Truly got a camera crew and a part-time dad. And because she was so young, she had no framework to compare it against. No before to hold up next to the after. The confusion, the emotional inconsistency, the father who was sometimes present and sometimes completely absent, depending on which wife's house was the priority that week. That was just her normal. That was just what family looked like. Now ask yourself what it does to a child when their normal is also being filmed, packaged, and broadcast to millions of strangers. When their confusion is a plot point. When their tears are B-roll. This is the part of the conversation that makes people uncomfortable, so let's go there directly. Child labor laws in the United States, particularly as they apply to reality television, are shockingly, almost criminally lax. Scripted television has protections limits on hours, requirements for on-set tutors, restrictions on what emotional scenarios a minor can be placed in. Reality television largely operates in a different legal universe. The logic, as absurd as it sounds, is that the children are not performing. They are simply living their lives, and cameras happen to be present. What that means in practice is that a child like Truly Brown had essentially no legal protection over her own story, no meaningful right to refuse filming on a bad day, no guaranteed ability to say, "I don't want this moment on camera." Her parents, at least one of whom, Christine, was herself contractually bound to the show, made those decisions. And the network that was paying the bills had every incentive to keep the cameras rolling, regardless of what was happening emotionally in that household. Every confused look Truly gave the camera when her parents argued, monetized. Every moment she sat in a room where the tension was thick enough to feel monetized. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family dinner that was staged to look more harmonious than it was, monetized. She was a child. She had no agent, no advocate in the room whose only job was to protect her. She had producers who needed content and parents who were drowning in their own emotional crisis. That is not a dramatic exaggeration. That is the structure of how reality television works. And it is a structure that serves everyone in that arrangement except the youngest person in it. Season 16. If you have watched Sister Wives with any level of attention, you know exactly why that season matters. Christine Brown finally says on camera to Cody and to the audience that she is leaving, that the marriage is over, that she has made her decision. It is one of the most watched moments in the show's entire run. People have analyzed Christine's body language in that scene, Cody's reaction, the way the other wives responded. Hours of YouTube content, Reddit threads, fan forums, all dedicated to breaking down every second of that conversation. But here is what almost nobody talks about. Where is Truly in that episode? Not in the scene where Christine makes the announcement that it is adult territory, handled separately, but in the surrounding footage, in the family scenes that frame the episode. Pay attention to where Truly positions herself. Watch who she gravitates toward. Watch the moments when she is on screen and the adults around her are visibly strained. Watch her face. She is a child trying to read a room that the adults in her life have filled with grief and anger, and the particular silence that comes before something breaks permanently. And she is doing it in front of cameras. And those cameras are sending that footage to a network. And that network is building an episode around it. And that episode is going to be watched by millions of people who are mostly focused on Christine and Cody, while a little girl sits in the frame, absorbing everything. And nobody is asking whether she is okay. If you go back and watch that episode knowing what you now know, knowing that Truly is the youngest, that she had the fewest years of stability, that she had no legal protection over her own story, it hits completely differently. The entertainment value evaporates. What you are left with is something much harder to watch. Now let's talk about a pattern, because patterns matter more than single moments. Look at the Brown children who are old enough to have aged out of active filming. Look at what happened when they crossed into adulthood and were no longer contractually convenient. Aspen Brown stepped back from the show significantly. Mykelti Brown built her own separate platform. Gwendolyn Brown became famous for her commentary on the show, which, if you read carefully, is its own kind of distancing. She is not participating in the show. She is observing it, critiquing it, processing it publicly on her own terms, through her own channels, on her own schedule. Peyton Brown gave interviews that were, to put it gently, not flattering to his father or to the production. Leon Brown has spoken about their own experience in ways that are measured but honest about the emotional cost of growing up in that environment. This is the pattern. Brown children who reach adulthood and gain control over their own narrative consistently, without exception, move away from the show. Some do it quietly, some do it loudly, but the direction of movement is always the same. Truly Brown is entering her teenage years. She is at the exact moment in her development when that question, who do I want to be, and is this version of my life something I chose or something I was placed into, becomes impossible to avoid. The statistical likelihood, based on every single precedent set by her older siblings, is that she will follow the same pattern, that she will begin to withdraw, that the cameras will have less and less access, that the version of Truly that TLC has been selling to the audience will become harder and harder to produce. And when that happens, pay attention to how the network frames it. Because if history holds, they will find a way to make even her withdrawal into content. There is one more layer to this that goes beyond Cody, beyond Christine, beyond the family drama that the show has built its audience on. TLC kept filming. That is the sentence that should sit with you. Not just through the rough seasons, not just through the period when Christine and Cody's marriage was visibly struggling, TLC kept filming through moments when children on that show were clearly, observably distressed. Producers were in those rooms. Directors were giving notes. Editors were watching the footage and making choices about what to include, what to emphasize, what music to put underneath a moment to tell you how to feel about it. These are adults with professional experience, with industry knowledge, with the ability to recognize when a child in their production is not okay. And the footage kept coming. The seasons kept getting made. The promotional material kept getting cut together and released. The little girl kept appearing on screen. The betrayal in Truly Brown's story is not only Cody's inconsistency as a father, it is not only the structural failure of a lifestyle that asks too much of the people living inside it, the betrayal is institutional. It is a network that looks at a child's suffering and sees a content opportunity. It is a production system that had no one in it whose job was to say, this particular child in this particular moment needs us to stop filming. That person did not exist in Truly Brown's life. And that absence is as much a part of her story as anything Cody ever did or did not do. There is a theory that has been circulating in the SisterWives fan community for years now. It does not come from a producer. It does not come from a family member who gave an interview. It comes from the audience, from the people who have watched this show closely enough and long enough to notice things that casual viewers miss. And the theory is this. Truly Brown is the most emotionally affected child in the entire Brown family. Not the most vocal, not the most publicly visible in her pain, the most affected. And the reason the audience believes this is not speculation pulled from thin air. It is a conclusion drawn from watching hundreds of hours of footage, with the kind of attention that the production team was hoping you would never apply. Think about what the audience has actually seen. They have watched Truly in rooms where her parents were barely holding it together. They have watched her navigate holidays and family events where the tension between Christine and Cody was so thick that even through a television screen, even with editorial music softening the edges, you could feel it. They have watched her try to connect with a father who, by the time she was old enough to really need him, had already emotionally checked out of his relationship with her mother, and by extension, had less presence to offer the child that relationship had produced. And here's the thing about being the youngest. Here is the thing that viewers who are also youngest children, or who have raised youngest children, understand in a way that the cameras could never fully capture. When you are the youngest, you are always the last to know and the first to feel. The adults around you are having conversations you are not included in. Decisions are being made above your head. The atmosphere of the household changes and shifts, and you absorb every single change without anyone ever sitting down and explaining what is happening or why. You just feel it. In your body, in the way meals feel different, in the way your mother laughs less, in the way your father's visits get shorter and his excuses get longer. Truly Brown felt all of that. And she felt it while cameras were rolling. And she felt it without the buffer of older siblings who could pull her aside and say, here is what is actually going on. Because her older siblings were processing their own version of this same collapse. Everyone in that house was surviving. Nobody had enough left over to fully protect the youngest one. The audience sees this. Not all of them can articulate it, but the comment sections tell the story clearly if you read them. The comments about Truly are different from the comments about any other Brown child. There is a tenderness in them that is almost protective. Viewers who have watched this show for years and have strong opinions about every other family member become noticeably softer when Truly comes up. Because on some level, even through the editing, even through the production choices designed to keep you emotionally managed, the truth of her situation came through. Children are not good at performing okay when they are not okay. And the cameras caught it, again and again, and TLC aired it anyway, and audiences saw it even when the show did not want them to look too closely. That is not a small thing. That is the audience's instinct working correctly in spite of everything the production was doing to direct their attention elsewhere. Now let's talk about what comes next. Not what the show will do. We largely know how that story ends. Let's talk about what Truly Brown's future actually looks like, based not on hope or on pessimism, but on the evidence of every Brown child who came before her. She is entering the years when identity becomes the central question. Every teenager faces that, but most teenagers face it with some degree of privacy. They make mistakes that nobody films. They go through phases that are not archived and monetized. They have the ordinary, essential, deeply necessary experience of figuring out who they are without an audience watching and a network profiting. Truly does not have that. Or rather, she has not had it so far. Every awkward year, every difficult moment, every instance of a child trying to understand a world that has not been fully honest with her is in the can. It exists in TLC's archives. It can be pulled, re-aired, repackaged, put in a retrospective special, used in a promo for a new season. Her childhood is not hers. It belongs, in a very real and legally binding sense, to a production company. And at some point, this is not a prediction. This is simply applying the pattern she is going to understand the full weight of. She is going to reach the age where she can look back at her own childhood footage the way you or I might look at an old photograph. Except her photographs move and have sound and were watched by millions of strangers and generated advertising revenue for a corporation that had no particular obligation to protect her. What happens to a person when they reach that understanding? Look at the siblings again. Gwendolyn Brown did not disappear quietly. She found a way to reclaim her own narrative by becoming the person who comments on it publicly, on her own platform, by her own rules. That is a power move dressed as entertainment, and it is a remarkably sophisticated response to having grown up without control over your own story. She took the audience's attention, which was always going to exist whether she wanted it or not, and redirected it through a lens she controls. Peyton Brown went a different route and gave interviews that were raw and direct about what it was like inside that family dynamic. He did not perform. He did not manage the narrative carefully. He said what he experienced, and the audience received it as exactly what it was. The unfiltered account of someone who had been waiting a long time to speak without a producer in the room. Leon Brown has spoken with the kind of careful, considered honesty that comes from someone who has thought deeply about their own experience and is not interested in sensationalism, only in accuracy. Leon's words carry weight precisely because they are measured. 3 different approaches, 3 different personalities, 3 different ways of processing the same fundamental experience, growing up inside a production, under lights, without full agency over your own story. Truly will develop her own approach. It will be shaped by her personality, which the cameras have given us partial glimpses of. Sharp, funny, emotionally perceptive, the kind of kid who notices more than she says. It will be shaped by the relationship she builds, or does not build, with her father as she gets older. It will be shaped by Christine's choices, by the new stability or instability that comes with whatever Christine builds in her post-Cody life. It will be shaped by therapy, hopefully, and by time. And by the particular alchemy of a person coming to terms with a childhood that was not entirely their own. But here is what the pattern tells us with near certainty. When truly Brown is old enough and ready enough and has found whatever form of safety she needs to speak openly, what she says will be significant. It will be specific in the way that only the youngest child's account can be specific, because she was there for the ending in a way her older siblings were not. She watched the final years. She felt the final withdrawal. She sat in the rooms where the last conversations happened. She was present for the version of Cody Brown that existed after he had already emotionally abandoned the marriage, after the pretense had worn away, after there was nothing left to perform for the family, even if he kept performing for the cameras. When truly Brown is 25 and finally ready to talk, that interview will be the most watched thing in SisterWives history, not because of drama, not because of conflict, but because she will be the last witness. The youngest one, the one who was there at the very end, still small enough that the adults around her might not have been as careful as they should have been about what they said and did in her presence. The one whose account, when it finally comes, will fill in every gap that the editing left behind. That is not a threat to anyone. It is simply what happens when children grow up. Let's zoom out one more time, because this story is not only about one family. It is about something much larger that SisterWives accidentally became a case study for. We are living in an era where the children of reality television are starting to reach adulthood in large numbers. The kids who are on John and Kate Plus 8, the kids from various property shows, competition shows, family-based cable productions. They are grown now, or growing. And the conversation they are starting to have publicly about consent, about the absence of legal protection, about what it means to have your childhood filmed without your full understanding of what filming meant, is a conversation that the industry is not prepared for. Truly Brown is part of that generation. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. But she is one of the most visible, because SisterWives was one of the longest-running family reality shows in cable history, and because her story has specific elements. The divorce, the polygamy dynamic, and the public nature of her father's emotional withdrawal that give it a particular weight. What happened to Truly Brown should not have happened. Not because Christine and Cody are uniquely villainous people, they are not. Christine, by most observable evidence, loves her daughter deeply and has tried to give her the stability that the marriage could not provide. But the system around them, the production machine that had every financial incentive to keep filming regardless of the human cost, that system failed her. And it failed her in ways that were entirely predictable, entirely preventable, and entirely profitable for everyone except the child at the center of it. There are real children in these productions. There are real emotional histories being created in front of cameras. There are real, long-term consequences to growing up as content. And until the law catches up to that reality, until reality television is held to the same standards as scripted production when it comes to protecting minors, there will be more children like Truly, more youngest ones who absorb the collapse without anyone whose job it is to stand between them and the camera. The audience watching Sister Wives always had more power than they were given credit for. Networks make decisions based on ratings. Advertisers make decisions based on viewership. The people sitting at home watching Truly Brown laugh in a promo clip were, without knowing it, participating in a transaction. Their attention was the currency, and the product being sold was, in part, a little girl's life. That is an uncomfortable thing to sit with. It is supposed to be. Discomfort is not always a signal to look away. Sometimes it is a signal to look more carefully, and to ask better questions, and to decide what kind of audience you want to be going forward. Here is what I want you to take away from this video. Not anger at Cody, though that is understandable. Not just sadness for Truly, though that is appropriate. I want you to take away the larger picture. Truly Brown deserved a childhood that was hers. She deserved the ordinary, unrecorded, privately messy experience of growing up in a family that was figuring itself out. She deserved to cry without a camera capturing it. She deserved to be confused without that confusion becoming a scene in an episode. She deserved a father who showed up fully, consistently, without the need for an audience to motivate him. She deserved advocates, adults whose only job, whose only loyalty, was to her well-being, not to a production schedule, not to a network's quarterly numbers, not to the brand of a lifestyle that her very existence was being used to sell. She did not get all of those things. And the record of everything she did not get is sitting in TLC's archives, cut into episodes available to stream, generating revenue to this day. The least we can do is to see it clearly, to watch that footage with eyes open instead of with the comfortable haze that good production music and clever editing are specifically designed to create. To say out loud that what happened to this child was not okay, that she deserved better, that the system that put her in front of those cameras without adequate protection was wrong, and that knowing it was wrong is a first step towards something better. Truly Brown is still young. Her story is not finished. The chapter that she writes for herself, on her own terms, by her own choices, without a producer in the room, and without a network owning the footage, that chapter has not started yet. And when it does, I believe it will be the most important part of everything she has to say. Until then, we keep paying attention. We keep asking the questions the show never wanted us to ask. We keep looking past the promotional clips and the carefully constructed family moments and the brand of harmony that was sold to us for over a decade. Because that little girl is laughing in the promo clip, she deserved someone who was watching not just to be entertained, but to actually see her. If you believe Truly deserved better, hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it says everything. This channel exists because this community refuses to look away from what reality television actually does to real people. If you are new here, subscribe. We do this kind of deep dive every week, and this is only the beginning of the conversation. And now I want to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me, what is the one thing you wish someone had done differently for Truly? Not for the show, not for the ratings, not for the brand, for her specifically. One thing. Drop it below. Let's actually talk about it. Because she deserved people who talked about it while it was happening. The least we can do is talk about it now.